So in our previous video we worked on the camera setup. Now in this video we are gonna work to set up our character player. So let's get started. We'll go into the player. Now there are three things that are needed to set up a character. A blend space that actually does a smooth transition between idle to walk or run or sprint, any animations you have. The second is the anim blueprint, which is animation blueprint that defines the rules for animation, different states for character, like when he's going to die, when he can attack or do stuff like that. And the third one is the character blueprint itself. So let's get started with the blend shapes first. We go to the animation, we select blend space 1D and select our player rig. We'll name this BS_player. Double tap to open it. And in the horizontal axis we'll name the parameter as speed, and since our character is going to have a speed of 1000, we can set this to 1000 as the max speed. Now at 0 we have to drag the idle, so at speed 0 he will be in his idle position, and at 1000 you can drag the run. To test, you can drag this green dot over here, and when you move it around you can see the transition it will have between the idle and the run animation depending on the speed. So that's the first part of our setup. Now let's work on the anim blueprint. So we can right click again, animation blueprint, again select our player character and okay, we'll name this NMBP_player, and again double click to get started. Now the first thing we do is we create a state machine. So state machine, add new state machine, and we can set it, you can drag and drop this here so it's connected to the outpost. Now double click on the state machine, and the first state we create is by dragging the pin from here and select add state. So that state of ours will be idle/movement. Now double click on this one and we go to asset browser. We drag the BS player, which is our blend space. We connect the output to here. Now we need to input the speed. So for that we'll first of all create a variable. We'll call it speed, which will be of variable type float, and compile, and we'll drag and drop that speed here. So that's connected. Now where do we get this value of speed? We need to go to event graph. From the stripe on owner we're going to drag a pin and say is valid. So this checks if we have a valid player possessing this anim blueprint. We'll connect this executive pin here. So if it's valid, we will get a velocity vector, get velocity. Then we will get vector length, and we will set that as the speed. Compile. Now there are a few more things we have to do with anim blueprint, so we can do that right now. We go back to this state machine and we drag this and we create another state. We'll call that death. That's for the when player dies. So we can double click and we have this death animation. We can connect it, so that's the animation that will play in that state. Now this over here is the rule that defines how we can transition from this state to this state. So let's create two variables. One is dead, that will be of type boolean, and we are gonna have a disappointment state, so we'll create that right now itself, is disappointed, and that's boolean as well. We'll compile. Now in here we'll say when is dead is true, he can transition. So that's the first part. Now from death back to idle, and we can define state as is dead, and we can call not. So when that variable is set to false, it can transition back to idle. So for that it's pretty straightforward, but now let's work on disappointed. So disappointed has two animations: a disappointed start, a disappointment loop, and a complete disappointed animation. Let's check them out. So this is a disappointed, this is the start, and this is the loop. So we are going to use start and loop for this one. So we get back to the anim blueprint, we drag from idle, add state, disappointed. Again we double click this disappointed to add the start, and we'll plug that in, and instead of disappointed we can have this at disappointment start. Now from start we go to another one, disappointment loop. Oh sorry, it'll be add state, and the name of that state will be disappointed loop. Add state disappointed loop. Okay, finally we got that working. And from here back to idle. Now for the rules, first of all, from idle to disappointment start, it'll be when is disappointed is true, so just drag and drop this here, and that's that. From disappointment start to disappointment loop, when this animations has played, we need to transition to loop. So for that we can double click here and say time remaining ratio, of this one, and say it is lesser than equal to 0.1. So 1 is the maximum value, 0 is the minimum. So by saying 0.1 we are saying when the animation is almost over, it can transition into disappointment loop. And from loop here we'll say when disappointment is set to false. So again not, and that goes into here. So that's pretty much the setup for our animation blueprint. We have an entry going to idle, idle can go to death state, idle can go to disappointment state, depending on the rules we have specified. So for the last part we need is the character setup. So for that we have the third person character. We can go into that, we can right click and say duplicate, and we can name this as player, and we can drag and drop that into our blueprint player here, move. Alright, so now currently it's set to the third person character. We can change it to our player. So first of all we'll get into the viewport, we'll select the mesh, and here instead of SK mannequin we'll select our player rig. Isn't he cute? Alright, now we can set the capsule first so it matches our player. So here at the bottom here we have a capsule height, so let's lower that, and the radius, now we can select our player and position it at the bottom. Alright, now in anim class we need to select the NMBP player we created. So now you can see it's there in its idle state, which is the entry state. Now one more thing before we end this video is the third person character comes with its own camera, which we don't need, so we can delete the follow camera, the camera boom, compile, save, and that basically is our player. So now to see it in action we can take the player character here, drag and drop it in the scene, position it at 0 0 and hit play. Okay, so right now we have a player defined, but we haven't set it as the default player. So let's do that first. We can go here, below we go, and we can set this one, auto possess player as player 0. So now we'll hit play and our character passes through the platform, but he is moving. So let's fix the platform so he can collide with our player. Now remember, when we loaded the assets, we turned auto create collision off. So we can select this, say edit platform, and in collision we can add a simple box simplified collision. So now save it and we hit play, and our player can step on it and walk around. So one more thing before we end this video, right now our character can fall off the platform, so we don't want that. So we can select the player, and here then there is a property called can walk off ledge. We can tick that off. So now when we play, he will stop at the end and he basically doesn't fall off completely. So that's it for this video. In next video we'll do few more settings with the character and get busy with the game.